Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Risk. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal. Here we explore how leaders in medtech navigate uncertainty, make better risk based decisions, and build safe and effective products to support sustainable growth. Today, I'm really excited to welcome my guest, Vilma Nespeskiana. She is the founder of Holistic Business Risk, a practice that is very interesting, and I hope you guys will enjoy today's conversation. Just to set the stage, today we're going to talk a little bit differently about risk. And it's not necessarily about risk management for medical devices, but the practice of risk in a broad sense. And that is why I'm pleased to welcome Vilma because she is an expert in the practice of risk, coming mostly from the fintech industry, but also some biotech experience. As you are settling down, you know that this is not a webinar or a lecture. This is a simple conversation, and you are a part of it. So make sure that you are sharing your perspective and your opinions and thoughts and ideas, questions, comments, anything is welcome. I'll keep an eye on the chat and bring that into our discussion to the extent possible. With that, Vilma, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Naveen. Really excited to join and then to be here. First of all, I am practitioner. I'm really a practitioner. I started long ago in banking, and later I switched to different industries and was working as a risk professional, also as business founder, joining management teams. So I touched risk from different perspectives. And there are two perspectives that I want to highlight. One is research. I researched the management practices, trying to understand why organizations often become more sophisticated on risk management when they grow and how this could be avoided. And another thing that it is that I want to share, I think that my background in risk management and my view of risk as evolving understanding over the life cycle is very much related with the fact that I am mother of two sons.
We'll talk about that in a little bit, Vilma, but I'm very interested to learn a little about your story, your career journey, and what has brought you to this point where you felt compelled to start your own practice, which you call holistic business risk. So tell us a little bit more about that and explain what you actually mean by holistic business risk.
Yes, I was kind of like working in different fields, especially in banking, credit risk, operational risk, and until I reached the point of the crisis 2008. Some of our participants remember this. It was the first time when I clearly saw that things that we are calling risk management and things that are happening in real business, in real life, a little bit apart. And it's like two different worlds. This idea I started to think, what is the essence of risk management? I loved banking. I was disappointed banking became over-regulated. And I was thinking that it should be something deeper, something different about risk management. And then I was looking around to different industries. I started to work mostly focused on operational excellence and working with different sectors. And everywhere I saw management teams trying to deal with uncertainty, trying to reach objectives and grow business sustainably. And then it was like, well, this is risk management. This is the essence of risk management. So maybe it is way to connect again business and risk together and look to risk as something invented by a regulator. So holistic risk came from the efforts and the need to bridge both worlds, business development and risk management. And I started to look as I did scientific research. I even enrolled myself in doctoral studies, and I got 5 years ago PhD, trying to understand how risk management is truly manifested in the management practices, how things that we do every day, how we make decisions, how we plan, how set accountability to each other within the team. Those things, all those habits, they form actually our behavior with risk. So this is the origin of holistic business risk.
Now, this is excellent. I think a lot of our listeners will relate to it because, Vilma, our world is quality and regulatory and research and development. And we talk a lot about safety, risk management, patient safety, customer focus. We also do some project management where we get to touch the business aspects of things, but we're really not exposed to the business in a holistic way. And I'm hoping that through our conversation today, we will learn a little bit more about what it means and maybe what role we can play. So let's start with the main theme of our discussion today. I'm fascinated by it. Even our standards that we apply in our business tell us that we have to manage risk from a product life cycle perspective. And I don't think we do it very well, especially in the post-market phase where we are constantly surprised by new failure modes, new issues. So what is your perspective, first of all, on life cycle risk management? What does that mean to you?
Great question. This life cycle perspective actually came from the very innovative way of setting up risk management guidelines for fintech industry. 2 years ago, together with national regulator and fintech community, we were co-creating management guideline. It was a huge step towards self-regulation. And we were kind of trying, first of all, to find the way how to diversify requirements because the company is very different in size and in their services. I believe that in medical devices are the same, like a huge variety of companies working in this field. And life cycle popped out as the idea how to diversify. And I can just give very simple examples. So when fintech as a company is licensed, at very beginning, you can easily manage, there are a couple of founders, very small team of professionals, or sometimes even founders share a different responsibility. And they all working as a fist. They see signals, they act on them. They do not wait until they become issues. They kind of they are in this survival mode and see all the context changes, and they act very fast and they share information. So they are purely holistic in that way that risk and business, everything is together. But when they grow, what happens? If they are smart in their decisions, they are successful. They grow and they start to scale. And I noticed that exactly when fintech companies, when they start scaling, usually this is the moment when risk somehow moves apart from decisions into reporting. And I was thinking how this happens. And my best answer is that when complexity grows, we need structure to keep control. And when we introduce structure, we kind of have those different boxes, and we, sales, risk, product development, business development, customer service. Customer moves to customer service, risk management moves to a box with a label of risk management. And what happens? Decisions are no longer taken the same way. The signals are not raw. They are not escalated fast. They are filtered through layers of reporting. They are prepared and delayed. And slowly, risk is disconnected from decisions and becomes kind of something to explain decisions afterwards for regulatory sake. And it is not the essence how risk management creates value to business. So I noticed those things. And then this life cycle, it's not only about evolution, it's also about paradox, losing this initial holistic approach and going into functional silos.
I think, Vilma, what you are describing is very familiar to me. I have lived this, and many of our colleagues who are joining today will also appreciate it. It doesn't really matter whether it's fintech or medtech. It's the same thing. No. So I'm hearing a couple of things. The first I'm hearing it from you is the whole notion of life cycle itself evolves as the business grows, as the company grows. So what we mean by life cycle in a startup stage is very different from what we mean by life cycle in a more mature, diversified fintech industry. Let's say they have mortgage, they have banking, they have personal banking, commercial bank. They have all kinds of, same thing, medtech. They have cardiovascular products, they have other products like big portfolio. So there are that aspect of life cycle. And I think there's another aspect of life cycle that we talk about most frequently is life cycle of a product itself. We just launched it. Now it's the first year of launch. versus the 10th year after launch. So it has matured. So there are two aspects of life cycle that I'm hearing. But before I go there, Vilma, I have one question that I want to ask you to position this nicely for our audience. I know you are based out of Europe. Do you feel like there's a different perspective on life cycle risk management in Europe versus the rest of the world, and particularly in the US? If you could speak to that, I think that'll help us understand the context a little bit more.
This, Naveen, I think that in terms of applying life cycle thinking, first of all, what I want to take from your reflection, that it equally can be adapted to business or organization as the whole, or even like a one on another service or product, and then using this product-wise thinking and understanding how differently risks are approached. Because even if you introduce new product, at very beginning, you want to test and your failure is different if compared when you launch already. When you operate in testing mode, and kind of relationship with risk and with uncertainty, with what good result means is different. What you have already approved, certified, and launching to your customers. Of course, in medical devices, you are dealing with health and life with people. In fintechs are dealing only with money and wealth, but both are important. But the question about Europe and the rest of the world, I think that the matter of fact that some areas are overregulated, to my understanding, and this project, when I got this huge opportunity to have around the table, literally around the table, regulator association and fintech companies that volunteer to participate in the co-creation guidelines, it opened eyes what huge gap or distance is between reality and how different stakeholders in ecosystem think about reality. A lot of imagination, like fintechs have fears how a regulator would interpret one or another thing. Regulator has their own interpretations and fears what is going on in business and how decisions are taken. I believe that going through this life cycle understanding, that how companies are developing, how overall organizational maturity is developing, how product maturity is developing, both parts can understand and establish more trust. So what happened, like, let me give an example. In Lithuania, when we approved this life cycle based guideline, what happened that regulator finally kind of like approved that it is completely legal not to have dedicated risk manager in early stages of business, because the team is very small and it is working like a fist, and the role can be covered by other risk professionals or combined, like, for example, information security officer or compliance officer can cover this like a more general risk questions, and then vice versa. And only when company grows, they start to expect to have like dedicated person performing the role. And it made life for everyone easier, because, if you are very small and you do not have a lot of things to handle and the complexity is not very high, it is actually not efficient to hire professional risk manager and do not have flow or load for him or her. So this is one aspect, that those fears, they create tension, and they create also a lot of, I would call it fake in industry. There are things that nobody really believes that are needed, that are working. They're trying to create, this visibility that, we're doing something.
I'm so glad you mentioned this, because this is happening. People believe that just because we have 100 procedures, we have great risk management. So I totally get what you're saying. Now, Vilma, let me welcome everybody who might have joined a little bit late. Guys, if you're joining just now, my guest is Vilma Nesteskiena, and she's a founder of Holistic Business Risk Group. out there in Europe, Lithuania, I believe, right, Vilma?
Yes.
Okay, in Lithuania. So we are talking about risk in a broader sense, life cycle risk management in a broader sense. Guys, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, please share that in the chat and we will bring them here in our discussion as much as possible. So Vilma, let's continue. Now, you made a very interesting point that in Lithuania, regulators and in the fintech industry, they got together and developed this, they co-created sort of this life cycle risk management expectation or regulation, whatever you want to call it. Continue building the story. You talked about what they did for the early startups. What about late stage? Did they make any changes? Did they introduce any new thinking in the risk management expectations?
Yes, in late stages, it is like, let me put that way. This life cycle based risk maturity model, it is model actually, and it is available on the Lietuvos Bankas website. And I even have like a short assessment based on this maturity model in my webpage, holisticbusinessrisk.com. If someone would be interested, it is based on fintech, but a lot of generic things just to have the flavor of it. But what I want to say, it is purely based on best practices. So meaning that before people got into the same room, literally into the same room, it was not this traditional way that regulator creates the draft and sends out for remarks, like consultations with market. It is everywhere. But they got literally to work together. We had a full day working session with participation of founders of fintechs, not only risk professionals, and this was a necessary condition. So this guideline is based on these best practices. We collected those best practices before this working session. And in guideline itself, this is a huge step forward connecting business and risk because best practice examples are coming from business. For example, in late stages, companies are expected to have strategic planning and strategy reviews and communication throughout organization, as for example. And the strategic planning is recognized as very powerful business risk control. So what we did I believe that it is the first example documented. We recognized that mature business practices like accountability, decentralization of decisions, leadership, even innovative thinking in later stages, that innovative thinking prolongs the life cycle of the business and strengthens competition. So all those practices are recognized as not only connected, but as a part of risk management practices. And what I see working with companies after this guideline was approved, that they started, to think when they hear something new coming from regulatory environment, they started to ask, okay, what does it really mean? Maybe we already do something in business. What is related with this regulation? Like, for example, like all this DORA thing, maybe you heard who are working with Europe, like all this cybersecurity requirements, to have certain procedures, etc. But it is normal for any tech company. You do not need to be regulated if you want to run your business sustainable and to have quality of your services in current environment. Like cybersecurity and resilience of your systems is thing number one you have to take care of, especially in service industries. When they see this kind of like requirement structure, they start to pick up, things that, okay, we already have this piece, we have this, we have this, and they connect what's already working in business, what are their habits, and only then they need to fill the gaps or maybe to make it more visual, more regular, more frequent, to be in compliance with.
I think you mentioned several things here that are worth capturing. What I'm hearing you say is that managing risk is not just about creating procedures. There's a lot more to it, not just about regulation, but there's a structural side to it. There's an operational side to it, and there's a procedural side to it. And it depends upon the nature of your business and what you are doing, because to some extent, you will need to have this foundational structure to be in the business. You don't need to create anything new. That's what I'm hearing you say. And the second thing I'm hearing you say is that the strategic planning itself is a risk control. Wow, that is, I have to stop a moment to think about that a little bit, because now at our level, when we are doing quality, regulatory, R&D, clinical, all these functional roles, we are not exposed to this strategic planning at the foundational level. We are kind of recipients of that. So tell us a little bit more about what you exactly mean when you say strategic planning itself is a risk control at the business level. I want to understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, I want maybe to correct a little bit to you. It's not only like a risk control, but it's also, it could be easily become resource. Let me provide example. It is just very recent experience. Working as consultant with a fintech company, I see the three strategic directions: to grow, very ambitious growth plans, to reduce compliance risk, and to keep profitability. And what does it say to me? That the goals already competing a little bit. If you want to improve for profitability and grow really fast, really ambitious, keeping a very strong eye on compliance risk, it might create additional tension for growth. Because if you want to play safe, it is hard to grow fast and then keep profitability. Then you have to move to more risky segments to work with more risky clients, most probably. But it is good to do this if you do this consciously and you understand that, okay, we have to be prepared for this. We have to have in place stronger risk competence, and we should not be in this growth maturity phase, but we should be in the next phase, the scale up phase, according to our risk maturity, if we want to pursue all those goals. And this is important. Sometimes what I see that from strategic planning, we do not have a very clear discussion at strategy level. The objectives that are distributed to different functions, they are competing and they are creating unnecessary tension. So this is important part. And I think that my suggestion would be, it is very simple questions just to reduce the tension. The first question is what we're trying to achieve. Really, what we're trying to achieve, to understand, to know no interpretations. Next question, what we rely on to achieve this. And finally, how could it fail? And then we have this more integrated reality, more shared reality between functions. It will be easier to move on with all those functional tasks.
I think you are giving us a framework to think about this, and I want to bring it back all the way to this whole idea of life cycle management. What I'm hearing you say is that there will always be tension between different goals because they compete with each other. And some functions are focused on one goal versus the other, so there'll be tension in functions. But the three questions that you have outlined for us are good questions to ask in a cross-functional manner. But what I think, clarify and maybe confirm that with you is the answer to those questions depends upon where you are in the life cycle. The answer will be different at a different point in the life cycle. The balance will be different. And this is where I think we have to be mindful of how the evolution, with the evolution of the business and the life cycle, how those answers should evolve. Am I understanding this correctly, Vilma, or is there anything more to it?
I completely agree with you. Very nice cover. And even more, it also depends on this like a deep strategy. I mean, the founders, for example, if company is in mature stage, but they have this vision to stay as the market leader, to show the way of the best practices, they have one approach. If founders are preparing this company for IPO, it will be a completely different approach. That okay, we should not innovate, we should not risk. Maybe we just keep it as it is until the owner changes. So it is normal, and it is why it is important to have within conversation also the founders and to understand their lifespan in this company.
Wow, Vilma, we have had such a fascinating conversation, and I just love it. Time flies. So we are at the end of our discussion today. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just process this conversation and think about 2 or 3 key points that you can share with us. In the meantime, I'm going to share a very quick announcement with my audience today. Guys, many of you know that Let's Talk Risk is about helping us become better at applying risk management to real world situations. But this requires becoming better at critical thinking and applying judgment, right? It's not just about the data, and this matters especially when the situation is complex and data is very limited, which is our real world, by the way. Which is why I want to share with you an exciting announcement. I have created what I call the LTR Risk Coach. LTR stands for Let's Talk Risk. So LTR Risk Coach, it is an AI-powered, what I call thinking partner and coach for medtech professionals like all of us. It is not to replace expertise, but it is designed to organize thinking, challenge assumptions, and create options for decision making. And I have trained it exclusively based on over 10 years of my own working knowledge and experience. It doesn't go out to the internet randomly to find answers to your queries. Right now, it is available on a very limited launch to a select group of people. If you're interested, reach out to me and I'll share the link with you and you can try it out. I hope you give it a shot. With that, Vilma, the floor is yours. Please share 2 or 3 key takeaway points with us.
Yes. So the first thing is keep in mind organizations often outgrow their risk management. Risk maturity evolves with the business, but sometimes business goes faster. And if risk gradually disconnects from business decisions, this is already the point where should be risk framework revisited and reconnected. Second thing is real maturity is modern frameworks. And even in age of AI, we should understand that tools do not remove uncertainty, but they make it look manageable because any tools cannot grasp the silence in the room, the hesitation to take decision, whispers in the kitchen. This is also our habits and behaviors and emotions also. So risk maturity is modern frameworks. And the last takeaway, there are practical ways to reconnect risk with decisions as complexity grows. Do not reinvent sophisticated procedures if you feel that risk is kind of falling apart, but start grasping weak signals and shape leadership habits with powerful but simple questions, like, for example, what we're trying to achieve here, what we rely on, and how it can fail. And this should help to keep this reality connected when complexity grows. And of course,
Wonderful.
I wish to prosper all the sector of medical devices and listeners from maybe other sectors as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Vilma. The line that's going to stand out to me after this conversation is that tools do not remove uncertainty. I love that. Many times we get fooled by it. We have an illusion that, hey, we apply the latest sophisticated tool and suddenly we have managed risk. So wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights. I know time differences on a Friday evening. You are there in Europe. It's difficult, but I really appreciate you taking the time, Vilma. I wish you all the best in your venture. And guys, all of you, thanks again for joining us. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We are going for a conference next week in Boston, which is the International MedTech Safety Conference. We'll be posting some updates for you and hopefully we'll have a good conversation there. So everybody have a good weekend. And Vilma, thank you once again.
My pleasure. Bye.